The last topic that we'll cover with our water is talking about drinking water. Now, we think of drinking water as the actual water you drink, but really drinking water is any water that is given to residential households. So the water in your toilet is drinking water. That is the same exact water that comes out of your tap. That is the same exact water that comes out of a watering fountain at a school or a place of business. All the water is the same. There's not different grades of water, whether you're drinking it or it's coming out of the sink or it's in your dishwasher. So all of this is referring to drinking water. We'll talk about it most like as people are drinking it, but just keep in mind that any water coming to your house is considered drinking water. A lot of drinking water comes from rivers and streams, or surface water, about 65% of it. If you live here in Germantown and you live more in the city of Germantown, your water is coming from surface water, and specifically it's coming from the Potomac River. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the actual cleaning process, but do know it gets cleaned. Just to show you, here is the Potomac River, where the water comes in. It goes through some pumps. It goes through some mixes to get any sediment out. It goes through different filters. It goes through UV radiation. It gets chlorinated. It gets fluorinated. And then it gets pumped to us. So lots and lots of cleaning in order to make sure that this water is safe for consumption, as well as washing your dishes in, for example. The other 35% is going to come from groundwater, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So our drinking water is monitored and it is regulated, just like our wastewater. Drinking water is regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And just like the Water Quality Act, this is regulated by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So what they're doing is they're going to those drinking filtration plants, like the one I showed you on the last slide, and they're monitoring pollutants. They're seeing, oh, you're sending this water out to the people, how much X is in it, how much Y is in it, how much Z is in it, to make sure that it's hitting the standards set forth by the EPA. This does not cover all drinking water though. It does not protect private wells. A private well would be, say, in your backyard, you guys have a well to collect well water. That is not regulated at all. It would be the responsibility of the consumer, so you, in order to make sure that that water is clean. Or if you live in a small little town, if it's less than 25 people that are using the same well, again, the EPA is not going to be regulating it, so it's your responsibility to make sure it's clean. Also, safe drinking water does not regulate bottled water. Bottled water has no regulations on it. I just want to say that again. Bottled water has no regulations on it. So with that being said, bottled water is not safer. I'm not saying it's worse. If you are a bottled water company, you don't want to be selling bad water because then people wouldn't buy your water. With that being said though, I think a study came out, it was about 5 years ago, so it might not be true anymore, but about half of all bottled water was just water from a sink that had gone through like a Brita filter, and that was it. So don't automatically think bottled water is better because it's just not regulated in general. Not only is the Safe Drinking Water Act making sure that drinking filtration operations are running smoothly and creating good drinking water, but it's also to a small degree regulating waste. And particularly, it's regulating waste that goes into the ground. So for example, an injection well. And this picture is showing a couple different types of injection wells. Injection wells are typically used for waste, whether it's a chemical or gas or just it's to put stuff somewhere. So they regulate these injection wells. They're also regulating septic tanks. Remember, septic tanks are where some people, that's where their wastewater goes. Now the reason they're regulating these two things, which might not seem like it's related to drinking water, the reason is to protect groundwater. As I mentioned before, some people have well water. Well, Well water comes from groundwater. Groundwater is found under the ground, and you use a well to bring that groundwater up to the surface. Well, anything that is releasing pollutants into the ground has the potential of polluting groundwater. So that's why the EPA is regulating these different types of injection devices, just to make sure that a septic tank isn't placed right over groundwater, or that if you are getting rid of some sort of waste in this well, you're not pumping it directly into groundwater. And this is just to protect people's drinking water sources. The Safe Drinking Water Act is regulating tons of different things. It regulates about 90 different chemicals. So it's making sure that this chemical is not above this level, and this chemical isn't above this level, for instance. Some examples of things it's measuring: 1, microorganisms such as E. coli. You've probably heard of E. coli before. It's used a lot in science, but Chipotle had this whole E. coli problem. E. coli is found in your poop. Your poop, deer poop, dog poop, cat poop. And when it's in high enough concentrations, it can make you sick. Well, remember, we're pulling our drinking water out of the Potomac River. That Potomac River received our wastewater probably upstream somewhere. So we want to make sure that E. coli is at a very low level so it doesn't make us sick. Also, in that purification process, we are disinfecting the water. One way we disinfect the water is chlorine. But we have to clean that chlorine out of this water. It's just like a pool. You wouldn't drink pool water because it's got chlorine in it. So one of the things they're measuring is how much chlorine is left over. And then it's also regulating just various chemicals, such as cyanide, which can be found naturally in the environment, mercury, which can be found in the atmosphere, which gets deposited into the water, pesticides, which we learned can run off. So it's filtering a lot of different chemicals to make sure that you and I are not exposed to this when we are drinking water out of the tap. With that being said, although it's regulating about 90 chemicals, we've identified another 100 chemicals found in our drinking water. We've identified them. We don't really know if they're good or bad, and so far we haven't regulated them yet. We don't have any limit set saying, yes, you can have this much, but you can't have this much. We don't know yet. Some of it is a lack of research. Some of it is, we know it's in there, but it would never get to a high enough level. And some of it is, again, the FDA, which is overlooking this department, as well as the EPA. They don't want to regulate business. So if it's in a business's best interest to not regulate it, we won't regulate it, unfortunately. But with that being said, don't worry. Don't be like, oh my God, there's 100 chemicals in my water. This is 100 chemicals across the entire United States. Here in Germantown, there might be like 10 chemicals. So that kind of helps. Now these pollutants, even if we have a pollutant in our water, but it hasn't hit that level, you and I as healthy adults are fine. However, people who are sensitive, and by that I'm talking, older people who have depressed immune systems, people who are undergoing chemotherapy or have HIV, talking about infants or small children, these are the groups of people who are more likely to be sensitive to drinking water, to tap drinking water. But again, with that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean bottled water is better for them. So just keep in mind, like as a healthy adult, you really don't need to worry too much about the stuff in our water. It is regulated enough to the point that we are safe. But you might want to exercise a little bit more concern for people who have depressed immune systems. With that being said though, if the water tastes fine to you, more than likely there's not a high concentration of a chemical in it where you would need to be worried for any group of people. So how does our water fare? And by our water, I mean here in Germantown. This is the water quality data, which is freely available on the WSSC website. And if you want to look at that WSSC website, I've posted the link down here at the bottom. Here on the left-hand side are different things that are monitored in our drinking water, and this is only a snippet. This tells you how much was found. It tells you how much could have been found, so what was the low end, what was the high end. At both the Patuxent tap, this is water being cleaned from the Patuxent River, as well as the Potomac tap. This also tells you what is allowed. And then, are we in violation? So are we violating any of these water quality standards? And for all of these, no. At least all the ones I chose. And actually for all of them, they haven't been. If you're also interested in where we get some of these from, it tells you where this source is coming from in our drinking water. So I found this to be a really cool website, a really informative website, and kind of reassuring too, that the water that I am drinking here in Germantown, I drink tap water all the time. I know I'm not going to get sick from it. I know that my family and my friends and old people and young people, they won't get sick from our water. So that's really, really reassuring.